Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to dive deep into Ukraine's plan to win the war against Russia, what it looks like, where the challenges lie, and how realistic success might be. Ukraine doesn't publicly use a simple defeat Russia outright narrative. Instead, its strategy is increasingly about shaping conditions in its favor over the long haul, making Russian aggression less and less viable. One concept that's gained attention is called strategic neutralization, the idea that Ukraine can survive and even thrive under continuous pressure by denying Russia meaningful gains. From the start, Ukraine aimed to reclaim territory and push Russian forces back. In October 2024, President Zelensky presented a victory plan with 5 pillars: geopolitical alignment, especially toward NATO, military development, economic recovery, national defense systems, and security guarantees. But the long war has shown that pure battlefield victory is extremely costly and uncertain. So, where does Ukraine focus to make its plan workable? First, it puts emphasis on denying Russia its operational aims through attrition and disruption. Not just by fighting for territory, but by targeting Russian logistics, energy, morale, and supply lines. Ukraine has increasingly struck Russian energy infrastructure with drones and missiles, what Zelensky calls long-range sanctions. Hitting refineries, pipelines, fuel depots makes it harder for Russia to fuel its war machine. Second, Ukraine invests heavily in its domestic defense industry, so it's not entirely dependent on external aid. Over 40% of front-line weapons are now locally produced, and that figure is a key goal to push even higher. Third, it works to maintain Western support and patience. A prolonged war is easier for Russia if Ukraine's partners tire or withdraw backing. Keeping the supply of advanced weapons, intelligence sharing, logistics, and diplomatic backing is central to making the war sustainable for Kyiv. Not just for months but possibly years. Fourth, Ukraine seeks to control the narrative, internationally and domestically. It frames the conflict as a defense of democracy and European values, and that helps sustain morale at home and helps pressure democratic states abroad to maintain assistance. Fifth, Ukraine acknowledges that war and state building must go in parallel. It's not waiting for peace to rebuild, it's restoring infrastructure, maintaining public services, and trying to normalize life under conflict. That helps undermine one of Russia's goals, to make life in Ukraine so unbearable that people accept occupation or capitulation. Now, this plan has serious limitations and risks. For one, Russia still believes it can win a war of attrition and is willing to take heavy losses to wear Ukraine down. Russia has vast manpower reserves, industrial base and strategic depth. It continues to fortify its defensive lines, like the Surovikin line, to slow any Ukrainian advance. The Russian defense works include deep trench systems, minefields, layered fortifications, anti-vehicle obstacles, and heavily entrenched artillery positions. Breaking through those defenses is costly in time, lives, and equipment. Ukraine also faces constraints in manpower, ammunition, logistics, and air superiority. Russia's ability to mass drones, missiles, and long supply lines gives it pressure on multiple fronts, stretching Ukraine's defenses. There is risk, too, of political fatigue. As the war drags on, citizens may push for a negotiated settlement even if it falls short. Ukraine must balance how much it demands how much it can realistically achieve while maintaining internal unity and morale. Then there is the danger of escalation. If Ukraine moves deeper into Russian territory or targets high-value strategic assets, Russia may respond with greater force, possibly even threatening nuclear weapons escalation. The calculus is dangerous. Another risk: Western commitment shifting. If a key backer withdraws, or if domestic politics in Western countries change, Ukraine could lose critical support at a bad moment. That fragility is a central vulnerability in Kyiv's strategy. Given all that, is Ukraine's plan likely to succeed? It depends on definitions. Have a total military overthrow of Russia or forcing regime change is highly unlikely. Have, but success in this strategy would be Ukraine making Russia's war aims untenable, inflicting enough damage to force strategic recalibration, and preserving Ukraine's state and society despite danger. In practical terms, have, Ukraine might reach a position where Russia cannot gain ground without unacceptable cost, while Ukraine continues to function, attract investment, rebuild, and gradually erode Russian power. Over time that can shift the balance to Ukraine's favor, even if the conflict continues. Have recent developments show both strengths and weaknesses of this approach. Ukrainian forces recently advanced in parts of Zaporizhia and Donetsk, of gaining ground near Orikhiv. Meanwhile, have Ukraine's long-range drone strikes and missile attacks on Russian energy facilities have contributed to fuel shortages and disrupted logistic lines. Have, but Russia is also striking Ukraine's infrastructure in return. Have mass drone and missile attacks on power plants and gas infrastructure push electricity and heating outages, worsening civilian conditions. Have Russia continues to claim territorial gains too. Putin recently stated that Russian forces seized nearly 5,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory in 2025. Have Ukraine's theory of victory then is to transform the war into one in which Russia remains active but cannot succeed. Have that's what strategic neutralization means. Have make Russian victory meaningless and put the onus on Russia to ask whether continuing the war is worth it. To make this work, have Ukraine must keep innovating militarily, adapt to new threats like autonomous systems, cyber warfare, drones, and anticipate how Russia will respond. It must also ensure resilience, hardening its energy and infrastructure, diversifying supply chains, securing population morale. Have maintaining governance under fire. Ukraine will have to pick its fights. Not every front is equally winnable. It may focus on weak points in Russian defenses, exploit logistics bottlenecks, and apply pressure where Russia is most vulnerable. Have, it should combine localized counteroffensives with disruption and defense elsewhere. Another important piece is deterrence. Have Ukraine aspires to security guarantees, formal and informal, from Western states that would deter Russia from widening the war. That helps stabilize gains and reduce the risk of Russian escalation. Zelensky's victory plan calls for those guarantees. Diplomacy also plays a role. Even if war continues, Ukraine must keep diplomatic channels open, shaping international opinion, and building alliances that impose costs on Russia economically and politically. In short, have Ukraine's plan to win is not a single dramatic breakthrough but a long competition of will, resources, adaptation, and resilience. Have, it's about making Russia's aggression costly and futile while preserving Ukraine's state, society, and future. At times, have this can feel like a war of attrition. Russia expects that, but Ukraine flips that burden back if Russia is bleeding. Have then Ukraine must make sure Russia bleeds more. Ukraine doesn't just defend, it actively undermines Russia's ability to wage war. If Ukraine can sustain this strategy for long enough, Russia may conclude that continued fighting yields little return. Over time, that could tilt the balance, but nothing is guaranteed. The war may drag on, outcomes could be messy, the toll remains heavy. Still, have Ukraine's current direction, focusing on strategic neutralization, domestic resilience, diversification of weapons production, and targeting enemy vulnerabilities, offers its best shot at achieving what many call a sustainable victory. Not one in which war ends tomorrow, but one in which Ukraine outlives Russia's ambition in this conflict.